Welcome, science friends, to other speciation terms and concepts. So really quickly, I want to explain a few other concepts and terms having to do with speciation. First, I want to talk about the rate of speciation. So there is a debate within the science community about how speciation happens. Does it happen really slowly, or does it happen super duper fast? Or is it both? So two new terms I want to introduce you to are gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Gradualism is just what it sounds like. Very gradual, slow, small changes over long periods of time. We can assume that big changes are a bunch of small itty-bitty changes all bunched together. So over long periods of time, very small changes can amount to a large change at the end of that long period of time. So for example, here we have some butterflies. Let's say we have a common ancestor that is the one at the very bottom. And as time moves on, we go upwards. And we see a branch happening. So we're seeing one species of butterfly become two now. And we can see a change in the pattern and coloration of this butterfly. So over time, one type of butterfly is going to lose its sort of yellowish orange color and become black and white with a few red spots on it. Very small changes over time. First, it becomes a little lighter in color. Then it starts to lose the orange and it has spots appearing on the bottom wing. And then again, over more time, it gets even lighter, it loses all orange coloration on its body, and eventually it appears as a black and white butterfly with some red spots. The other speciation happening, very slowly over time, it gets more and more orange and loses a lot of that darker coloration. So in that first butterfly, we see an increase in the orange on the body color and in the wings. And as time moves on, it loses more and more of the black on its body and on its wings. It just gets a more richer, browner color instead of a black and white. And again, eventually that butterfly turns into various shades of orange butterfly, losing a lot of the dark coloration. So very small changes over a long period of time is gradualism. The other school of thought is called punctuated equilibrium. So punctuated means a lot very quickly. And eventually it all evens out, so equilibrium, but very dramatic changes happen in a short period of time. So very rapid bursts of change. All of a sudden, boom, completely different. And then it's going to be the same for a while, reaching an equilibrium. And then boom, a lot of change really quickly, and then it stays that way for a long time at a sort of equilibrium. So here we see the same butterflies, but instead of sort of slowly changing over time into those new species, we see, bam, all of a sudden it's all orange, and it's going to stay that color and that way for a very long time. And then boom, going the other direction, we see that black and white butterfly very dramatically changed, but then it's going to stay that black and white color for a very long period of time. So the change itself is very rapid, but then after that change happens, it stays constant or the same for a very long period of time. More terms, we're going to look at the difference between convergent and divergent evolution. So convergent evolution means that we have similar structures seen in different animals and plants, but they do not share a common ancestor. The driving force for their evolution is a common environment. So therefore, the nature is naturally selecting for similar adaptations that are good for survival. They evolve independently from each other, even though they end up with the same traits. For example, here we have a shark, which is a type of fish, an ichthyosaur, which is a sort of dinosaur, and then we have a dolphin, which is a mammal. If you notice, they all have very similar features and traits. They have a sort of torpedo shape that's very hydrodynamic. That means they can swim easily through the water. They all have pectoral fins, so fins that come off the side where their arms might be if they were mammals. They have dorsal fins on their backs, and they have powerful tails to help push them through the water. All of these traits are very similar. They look like they could possibly have a common ancestor, but they do not. These traits are what help it survive in its environment. So we see that these are very advantageous traits to have, especially since all of these are predators. They are able to be successful and therefore pass on these advantageous genes to their offspring. But again, they do not have a common ancestor. They're not related very closely, but they all seem to have developed these traits separately from each other because they are all advantageous to that aquatic environment. Divergent evolution, on the other hand, is when we see two species or populations coming from a common ancestor. We have evidence of homologous structures, so they have the same structures, and that homologous structure is always going to be an example of divergent evolution. So to diverge means to split or to move away. When we have species with a common ancestor, we see that split like we saw with the butterflies. Well, here's another example. We have woolly mammoths and modern elephants. They are very similar because they share a common ancestor. They both branched off from a common elephant-like ancestor. The woolly mammoths and modern elephants, they had big ears, they had trunks, they had tusks, they had similar body shapes and structures, which indicates that they came from a common ancestor. They have the same anatomical pieces, but at some point in time, they diverged. Maybe depending on their environment, the woolly mammoths were very successful in the colder environments due to their thick fur. Modern elephants were more successful in the warmer climates because they didn't have the fur. And so we can see that, yes, because of those common attributes and the homologous structures, they came from a common ancestor and they diverged at some point. And the woolly mammoths are now extinct. They were not able to adapt to the new climate change, and modern elephants are still around. Their traits were more beneficial to their survival. The last one I want to talk about is coevolution. Co means together. So these are species that evolve together. We often see it in pairs of species that interact with each other often and very closely. And these changes in traits of one species affects the changes in traits in another species. So for example, here we have a cheetah with some sort of antelope or gazelle. Predator-prey relationship. These are very closely interacting. Cheetahs choose faster prey because they are faster animals. The speed of the cheetah directly affects the speed of its prey, and the speed of the prey directly influences the speed of the cheetah. Only the fastest cheetahs who can capture those fast prey animals will survive long enough to pass on those fast genes. And only the fastest prey animals, the gazelles or antelopes, who are able to escape from the cheetahs, their fast genes are then passed down to their offspring to create fast gazelle and antelope babies. And the faster the one of those gets, the faster the other needs to get to catch up. So the faster the gazelle, the faster the cheetah needs to run. And the faster the cheetah runs, the faster the gazelles need to run to get away from the cheetah. And so there's this relationship where the traits of one directly affect the traits of the other. That was other speciation terms and concepts. I hope it helped.